Uh,
Hi, everybody. Karina Smith here with We the People Podcast Show. Welcome back. I am very honored to have Tiffany with me today, and she is the representative, the owner of Aunt Tiff's Place. Hi, Tiffany. How you doing? Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your organization, how you got started, what caused you to get involved in helping victims of domestic abuse and domestic violence and so on? And how did you come up with the name?
So the name came from my niece, who had basically helped me get into my first building, and it kind of came because before I even knew who I was at the age of 9, I became an aunt, and so like all I ever remember is being called Aunt Tiff. From growing up, from being so little to up into adulthood, it was always Aunt Tiff from my nieces and my nephew, and taking care of them. So before I was really in anything, I was Aunt Tiff, and it just kind of stuck. And with my niece being one of my biggest supporters and helpers, who I helped pretty much raise until I left my home state. I asked her for her opinion, and she just said Aunt Tiff, and I said, "What do you mean?" She said Aunt Tiff's place, because that's where the safe place is to go. Everybody wants that family member, that person that they wish would have showed up for them when they were going through their stuff, and you're that person to everybody. So you can be, you have the girls that come to you, you treat them like family. So you're, in a sense, you're Aunt Tiff. You're their role model, that aunt that they can look up to.
So, just to kind of rewind to when you got started with this type of work, what caused you to want to work with victims of domestic abuse, violence?
So I came from a very, very rough background. I didn't grow up in a great environment. I grew up surrounded by drugs, alcohol, poverty, and domestic abuse. That's pretty much all I seen most of my childhood. And then I end up becoming a victim myself of domestic abuse. I thank God I never partaked in the drugs. I did have a little bit of a drinking problem for a while, coping with the pain of being sexually abused by a stepbrother, and not having no support, and not having anyone I felt like to advocate for me, to look out for me. So it went from childhood all the way into adulthood, and then me looking for that love from somebody, anybody, just wanting to feel like somebody loved me and somebody needed me. And so I fell victim to men that just wanted to use me and abuse me and take my kindness for a weakness. And I just wanted some kind of love and some kind of feel like I was in some kind of stability. So I settled for less, and it didn't start out that way. It always started out with blood bombing, and then slowly different little things, little red flags. And I just kind of make excuses, and it ended up being to where I couldn't do anything. The little bit of friends that I did have were no longer around. I didn't have family support, and so I just felt stuck and trapped. And um, in that environment for, it took me years to get out. It took me almost 10 years to leave. And once I got out, I made myself that promise that if I get out, I'm going to help somebody else so that they don't have to stay as long as I did. I stayed because I had nobody to help me with my kids. It was just me and the boys. And I'm like, well, I don't have no family to run to. I don't have anybody that can help me out of this situation. I have nowhere to go. What am I supposed to do? I have 3 kids by myself. So I stayed and then it got to the point where my kids got to elementary school. My last one was 10. My youngest was almost 10 years old. And I said, got to the point where the 10-year-old, the 13-year-old, and my 16-year-old at that time were sleeping with knives under their pillows and saying, Mom, next time he touches you, we're going to
Did
kill
you
him in
say
his
your
sleep.
children were sleeping with knives under their pillows?
Yes. They were tired. They were sick of it. They didn't, for the most. I always thought when they were younger that they didn't see the violence. They didn't see the abuse. Like I thought it just, I would, it always happened behind the bedroom door, but they weren't blind to it. They were, they heard us fighting. They heard the noise, and it started, getting to that point where he wasn't keeping it behind the door. He didn't care. He would, throw laundry soap in my eyes if I came home because I bought laundry soap versus buying him alcohol. He was like, why would just. I sat the laundry soap on the table and and he starts looking through the bags for his bottle of alcohol. And when he seen it wasn't there, he just picked up the laundry soap and threw it across the room at me. And it went all in my eyes. I thought I was going to go blind, and it was a very scary situation at that time. And there was another time where he wanted me to buy alcohol, and I went to the gas station and I got gas for the gas can. And where's my bottle? Where I said, I'm not buying it for you. I'm not doing this no more. I'm not gonna keep going. Like, I'm not doing it. And oh yeah, so you went and bought gas, but you couldn't do one thing that I asked you, and just he was messing with that thing and doused me with gasoline. And it was just gotten to that point where I was like, I can't live like this no more. I always fought back. I always was like, okay, you're not gonna sit here and disrespect me. And so for a while, I thought it was okay because I'm fighting back. I'm doing what I gotta do. Like, I wasn't like, I'm not a victim. I'm not this
So,
person that needs pity. I need to, I'm standing up for myself.
so to understand you, did you perceive yourself as in control of the situation for a long
Yes.
time? And at what
Mm-hmm.
point because I'm sure this resonates with a lot of people out there, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But at what point did you suddenly change your mind or realize this is out of control and I have to get out with my children?
When it got to that point and I realized that they were legit sleeping with the knives under their pillows, and one of them had a baseball bat under their bed, I've seen it. And when I went in to do laundry once, and I really didn't think too much of it until my middle son came in and said, Mom, next time he touches you, I swear to God, we are going to kill him. And I just is like, I can't let my kids go to jail trying to protect their mother. This is not, I can't do this no more. I begged and pleaded with my friends and family, my niece. I didn't really talk to my niece too much about what was going on, but really just with my friends, like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. And I need a break from my kids. Like, can somebody help me watch my kids for a few hours? Just give me some mental clarity. And it got to that point where I had a couple of friends still left, and my best friend had said, "Hey, I'm going to Florida for my birthday," and she's like, can you get away for 2 days? And I was like, I don't know that that's going to be feasible. But because we were still in that process of like, I'm in control, I'm good, I'm going to do what I want when I want, and you're not going to tell me what to do. I was like, yeah, I'll just have, I'll just have, my friend, the other girl, watch them. She said she can watch him for 2 days. So we went for a weekend. He blew my phone up the whole time I was gone. I just ignored his calls, and I wasn't stressing it because I knew where my kids were. They weren't with him. They were safe. So I was like, I'm not stressing it out. And we were sitting on Miami Beach, and looked at her and I said, I'm moving to Florida. And she said, what? I said, girl, I'm moving to Florida. I can't live in that house no more. I can't do this no more. And she's like, "No, you're not. No, you're not." I said, "Yes. If I'm gonna move to Florida." And then we kind of laughed it off and went home and went back into my chaotic world of dealing with the abuse. And I was involved in a good church, and A year later, it took me about a year. I was still, it's still in the back of my mind. And a year later, my boys' youth pastors announced they were moving to Florida. And I said, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And now I know somebody in Florida. Maybe my dream is coming true. And about 6 months after they got here, it was right before Thanksgiving. Called and said, we miss you and the boys, and you guys should come visit us. And I said, oh my gosh, I miss, the boys are missing you like crazy. And I actually did stash a little bit of money aside. So yeah, I was like, we would love to. Are you sure? And she said, yeah, come down right before Thanksgiving, spend 2 weeks with us, and then go back. And so I was like, okay, all right, that sounds wonderful. And got off the phone with them, and I said, hey, we're going to visit, past the pastors, for 2 weeks right before Thanksgiving. I didn't ask, I told, and that's what was part of me feeling like I'm in control. I'm telling you, I'm going to Florida for 2 weeks to visit. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. They invited, and I'm going. I had just bought a new car, but I didn't want to
And you're
drive that
bringing your
car.
children with you, right?
Yes, I did. I said I'm gonna go visit them, and I ended up getting a rental car. And he at the last minute, he's like, "No, you're not going. Well, I'm coming with you." I said, "You're not gonna maintain your fake image for 2 weeks in their house. How are you gonna go without alcohol? Drink? You can't drink in a pastor's house." And he's like, "Oh, I'm coming." And so he ended up riding with us. We came out. We were here for 4 days, and then he couldn't take it anymore. We had went down to Miami Beach because I promised my oldest that he could go down and see Miami Beach. And we're in the gift shop, and he's yelling and screaming, telling me, "Come on, we need to go. You need to come on. You're taking too long in the store. I'm gonna leave you." And I knew he had already been drinking, but he had the car keys. And I'm like, give me the keys. I'm driving. Okay, we're leaving. But while I was walking around the store, I was literally on the phone looking at plane tickets because he's like, I want to go home. I want to go home. And I'm like, oh, you want to go home? You really want to go home? Okay, I got you. And I was like, give me the keys. I'm driving. And I had literally booked him a flight to go back home while we were walking around the store. So I started driving, and he's like, where are we going? Like, where are you going? I was like, you wanted to go home. And he's like, yeah, I did. I was like, well, you're not taking the rental car, because he had threatened to leave us in the store. And I'm like, the rental car is in my name. I'm going to call the police if you take off with the car. And so after I got him to settle down, when we started driving and we drove up to the airport. I said, well, you said you wanted to go home. I emailed you your ticket. Go home. Have a nice time at home by yourself, because you're not going to ruin my vacation. And he's like, "Oh, what are you going to tell the pastors?" And I said, "I'll just tell them you something came up. You had, an emergency or work called or whatever, and I'll go back home and go back to theirs, and then I'll drive home." And we went back, and everything was okay. They were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm good." And then I started driving around Northport, and I'm looking at houses, and my boys are like, "Are we moving to Florida?" I said, "Oh, I'm just looking. I'm just curious of what prices are out here." And I started seeing for rent, 3-bedroom house, 1250. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can afford to live. I can afford to live by myself. I'm paying $2,400 a month for the house that I'm in right now. So I just like kept it to myself and just told them I didn't want them to accidentally spill the beans. And I'm just like, okay, God gives me the money, we're moving to Florida. Kept it to myself, got home, drove home, came home to my house being destroyed. He messed it all up because he was mad because we weren't coming home when he wanted me to come home. And 2 days later, the 3 days before Thanksgiving, I had went to get food. The kids were already at school. They were at not at school, but they were at a friend's house. I had dropped them off to go grocery shopping. And Maryland has a lot of winding roads, and I was going about 40 miles an hour down this steep hill. And at the end of the hill was a guy making a legal U-turn, and I couldn't stop in time, and I slammed into him, going into about 20, 25 miles an hour, and totaled my new car. And I was just freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen now? Now I don't have no car. It's Thanksgiving, and as soon as I got home and got situated, called a lawyer and I said, what are my options? Because he was making a legal U-turn. It's his fault. The police said it was his fault. And he's like, well, we're going to send you to physical therapy. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And you should be able to walk away easily with about $35,000. And I was like, that's my ticket out. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just told my husband, ex-husband now, but my husband at the time, I was like, oh, they said that I'm not eligible for any help because they're trying to say I was speeding and this, that, and the third, because he thought that he was going to get a big check. And I was like, no, there's no money, but I do have to go to physical therapy. So I did physical therapy for about 6 months. And when that was done, and the lawyer's like, okay, well, here's for the money that we settled on. You're going to get a check for $35,000, and that is unfortunately including the amount for you to get your car to get a new car. And I was just like, okay, sure. So I got the money and stashed as much as I could. And as soon as he went out, we got the money for the U-Haul. I got in the car and we took off. And that's how I ended up here in Florida. I was like, I
Literally
wasn't going
just
to tell
took
him.
off.
Yeah, I took off and got here and rented an Airbnb for about a month and got into my place and got situated. And he shows up. He tracked us down, basically moved himself in. And Northport police unfortunately told me they couldn't make him leave because we were legally married and it was a civil matter. And I said, okay. So it took me a while to get him out. Once the my one night, my son, my 16-year-old, actually called the police and said, my stepdad has a knife to my mom's throat right now and says that he's going to kill her, and they're arguing and I'm scared. And the police came, they looked at my neck and said, oh, there's not enough of a mark. It's he said, she said, it's a civil matter. And I said, well, my son just told you. But the officer said, well, it's he said, she said. Your son is your son, and why would we not think that he would lie? I said, because he's 16. He's has he's got disabilities and stuff like that. Why would he lie about that? And they said, well, there's nothing we can do. Just you can go in one room and he can go in the other room. We can't make him leave. And I'm like, okay, all right. So he promised the officer he would stay in the bedroom and we were going to stay in the living room. And short while later, he calls the police and tells the police officer that my son, my 16-year-old that had just called the cops on him, started saying that he was going to kill him and he was going to do this and do that. And I'm like, no, 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 no. So they came back storming in talking about, where's your son? And I said, first of all, if any of them was going to say that, it would have been my middle child. And my middle child is not even here. He's at a church conference in Orlando. My son never said anything like that. He never said that he would kill him or anything like that because he's got Asperger's and that's just not who he is. So they left, and then he came back out and just kept calling my son names, calling him gay, calling him a faggot, and all kinds of horrible names. And so that triggered me, and I got up and I was like, just like you grabbed a knife, I can grab a knife too. You want to go down this road? We gonna both stab each other, I guess, basically at
So
this
you're
point.
telling me that the police actually does absolutely nothing until the damage has been done.
Nope, they
Because
don't
you
do
can
anything. It's a civil matter. It's a civil matter is all I got told.
until he
Until there's
punch
a
you or become violent in any other way, until there's a physical mark, they do nothing.
they just tell you to either, well, you can leave. The third time they came out that night, they said, well, why don't you leave? And I said, because this is my house. My name is on the lease. His name is not on here. Everything is in my name. why can't you make him leave? They said, well, because one, like I said, you're legally married, and two, like you said, he's intoxicated. I said, okay, so let him
All the
leave
more
and
reason
pull
to
him
make
over
him
and
leave.
give him a DUI. That's what they did in Maryland.
Yeah,
Why can't you do that here? And they said, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. Why don't you leave? And I said, where are we going? Where am I going at 2:30 in the morning with two kids and two dogs? And I'll leave the
exactly.
dogs here. I said, I can't just leave my dogs because every time we fight, he lets the dogs out. And now I have a huge fine with the county because he kept letting the dogs out. I'm
Tiffany,
not
can
leaving.
you look, Tiffany, we're almost at the end of part one here, and we're gonna continue with part two, so everybody can tune in and watch part two of Tiffany's story because it's extremely important that this message gets out to people because so many go through the same. When you look back now, do you see your story in other people? Just very quickly before we end part one.
Yes, I talk to a lot of girls, and they go through the same thing. They're told that it's a civil matter. Oh, because he didn't physically assault you, but he held your phone hostage for 4 hours so you couldn't leave. But there's no physical marks, so there's nothing we can do for you. There, you can leave, or you're done, or you have to stay and deal with it. And a lot of them are even worse because Florida's a 50-50 state. And if you are
Yeah,
in an abusive situation, if he strangles you and he bails himself out of jail, you still got to give him 50% rights to your kid. And that's a huge problem.
we're going
That's
to
why
talk
girls stay.
we're going to talk more about this in part two and exactly what happens when law enforcement is pulled into the situation. And we're going to talk also about what Aunt Tiff's place now does. Stay tuned with us and check in with part two when I talk to Tiffany about Aunt Tiff's place. Thank you so much for watching for now. We'll see you just soon. Thank you.
Thank you.